Tonight on the Daily Wrap, former Vice President Dick Cheney sees Iran nukes falling on our future as two more Democratic senators line up behind the president's Iran nuclear deal. National security expert Fred Fleitz joins us to dig a little deeper into what the controversial agreement means to you. Then, the Donald goes all Willie Horton on Jeb Bush as he posts a negative campaign video that's sure to do some damage. Who's Willie Horton, you ask? You'll want to stay tuned if you want to find out that answer. And that Kentucky clerk refusing to issue marriage certificates to same-sex couples is now openly defying the Supreme Court. We'll have all this and much, much more because this is the Daily Wrap, live from New York City. And welcome to tonight's show, everybody. I'm Rick Unger, and my co-host Joe Concha has the day off. But joining us tonight is the assistant online editor for Commentary Magazine, Noah Rothman. Hello, Noah.
How you doing?
Nice to have you back.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And to his right, you know him, you love him. He's the editor of thewisdomdaily.com. Say hello to Brad Hirschfield, who's here. So if we're all ready, gentlemen, let's get right to the Daily Download. With Democrat Senators Bob Casey of Pennsylvania and Chris Coons of Delaware coming out today in support of the administration's Iran nuclear deal, it would now appear to be a foregone conclusion that there will be enough Senate votes to sustain a presidential veto of a congressional resolution condemning the Iran deal. However, there remains no shortage of experts who continue to insist that the deal is a dangerous one and should not be allowed. To that end, I sat down earlier today with the Senior Vice President for Policy and Programs with the Center for Security Policy, Fred Fleitz, who has 25 years' experience working with the CIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, and the State Department. Fred, thanks so much for joining us today. I know you are on your way to what promises to be a pretty interesting protest rally. Why don't you tell us what you're up to tonight?
Well, it's going to be a large rally outside the offices of Senator Kirsten Gillibrand. For those of you who live in New York, this is 783rd between 49th and 3rd. It's a rally to convince Senator Gillibrand to vote against this terrible agreement on Iran, the nuclear agreement on Iran.
Well, I know you've written a great deal about the agreement with Iran, and I know that you certainly are not in favor of the agreement. You wrote a very interesting piece today where you talk a great deal about the secret deals. My first question to you is, we're aware of this one that we've been hearing about. Are there more that we know exist?
Well, there's supposedly two secret side deals to the Iran deal. One is how to resolve questions of PMD, possible military dimensions of Iran's nuclear program. The other is access to the Parchin military base, where Iran supposedly has been engaged in explosive testing related to the development of nuclear warheads.
This is what we're aware of.
That's what we're aware of. We've been told there may be more, but no one knows what they might be.
So let's focus on that. As I understand what this side agreement, for lack of a better word, is, this would allow Iran to basically do their own investigation and assessment of what we'll call environmental, what's the word for it, where they're going to be able to check to see if there's anything in that environment that's radioactive. But they're doing it themselves. So obviously the fear is, well, if we let them inspect it themselves, they're not going to tell us the truth.
Well, to be precise, Iran is not doing the investigation. Iran is collecting the samples supposedly under the supervision by remote cameras of the IAEA.
So the IAEA theoretically should be able to watch what they're doing as they collect those samples.
That's what they're saying. Iran will provide photos of sites where supposedly they were engaged in nuclear activities, and Iran will, the IAEA will pick out locations within those photographs where samples should be selected. Look, I've done arms control for a long time for the CIA and the State Department. This is really an absurd arrangement. You don't let a state engage in a suspect nuclear weapons program to collect samples on their own nuclear activity.
Well, let me ask you this. You know, you've been very clear in your opposition, and I've read a lot of your reasons, and you make sense. You do. What do you say to those who first say that we're better off with this deal, A, because if we do ever have to go to war with Iran, this will actually put us in a position to know the bombing sites that we'd want to focus on?
I don't think we're going to learn very much from this process, which will wrap up by December of this year. There's going to be very limited access to suspect and military facilities. I don't think there will be any access to military facilities. And I agree with Senator Robert Menendez, who said that this will actually increase Iran's capability to make nuclear weapons fuel through the duration of the deal. That's why he said he's not going along with this deal, because he does not want his name to be on an Iranian nuclear weapon.
Yeah, no, I understand he said that. Now, let's turn to the politics a little bit. We don't have a lot of time tonight, unfortunately. At this point, it looks like the president will probably at least have enough supporters in the Senate that were he to have to veto the resolutions coming out, he would probably succeed. Do you agree?
Well, there's a debate right now whether the president will get enough support where he would get a veto-proof majority or a filibuster-proof majority.
Right.
And I think we're right now looking at we're hoping he will not get a filibuster-proof majority. But what's really alarming is that the Democrats are thinking of blocking a vote in the Senate on this with a filibuster, which I think is really reprehensible. Put it to a vote so all Americans know where members of the Senate stand on this.
You know, the one thing, I mean, I suppose I could say that we've been seeing the same thing when it's Republicans filibustering, but setting that aside, is there any reason this shouldn't be treated as a treaty requiring a 2/3 vote of support from the Senate?
It is a treaty. It should have been submitted as a treaty, and under the Constitution, 2/3 of the Senate should have to ratify it. If it's such a good agreement, why didn't the president submit it as a treaty? There's a reason, because the
why does he even have a choice? I mean, who gets to determine what's an executive agreement, what's a treaty?
Under the Constitution, it is the tradition. That's the way things are done. I think if it was such a good agreement, it should have been submitted as a treaty.
Interesting. Fred Fleitz, they're telling me I'm out of time. I could talk to you for an hour about this, and actually I hope we get to have a deeper conversation about it. You know a lot about it. People out there really are not clear on whether they should or shouldn't be for this treaty, because I think it is. Thanks so much for joining tonight.
Good to be here.
Take care. And thanks once again to Fred Fleitz. Meanwhile, in a Wall Street Journal op-ed, former Vice President Dick Cheney, along with his daughter Liz Cheney, argued that President Obama's Iran deal will result in the first atomic bomb being dropped since Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The question is that hyperbole, or is there a legitimate argument to be made, Noah, that this deal really does put us closer to Iran having the bomb?
I think there's a legitimate argument to be made that that it does put Iran closer to having a bomb, and it does put us one tick closer on the nuclear clock to seeing the unthinkable happen again. Sure, there's an argument to be made there. Whether or not that will be the case, I think, is actually premature to argue, and it certainly doesn't help the political case right now. When you're trying to drum up support on some on-the-fence Democrats, hectoring them, particularly with the voice of Dick Cheney, who doesn't have the world's best reputation on the left, will probably push more Democrats toward the president.
Brad, don't you wonder why Vice President Cheney does this? I mean, that is, so far as I can recall, the most hyperbolic, that's the only word, statement that I've heard anybody use. People are certainly against this deal. But why does he do that? What does he gain?
So I actually think Noah's right, but I also want to give everyone, left and right, the benefit of the doubt on this. I think he's using it precisely because it's not hyperbolic, but it's shocking and disturbing. And there is no question that Iran was sprinting for nuclear capacity. So I don't know if we can blame the deal, but we better get used to the fact that we are empowering and helping that sprint. And to the extent that that unleashes an arms race in the Middle East among competing Shia and Sunni powers, we're going to have to deal with that.
Guys, what about those who would say to you that this deal actually improves our situation? If we do end up having to go to war, at least we'll know where these different sites are. Do you buy it, Noah?
No, I don't buy that at all. Particularly,
see, Brad doesn't.
Right, because the very last-minute caves that were made in this deal, which lift the arms embargo, which lift the ballistic missile embargo. I know we already have the Russians speeding S-300 surface-to-air missile systems over there. It makes our job that much harder if we do have to go to war.
There's no question. We know what we know, and we're not going to learn more because of this. And what's worse, we may rest in the complacency the deal creates and know less because we make presumptions we shouldn't be making.
So, guys, folks out there, if you have something to say about the Iran nuke deal, and we know that you do, and if you think Dick Cheney is right, let us know. Give us, drop us a line at newsmaxtv.com/comments, and be sure to get your copy of Dr. Ben Carson's book, One Nation, absolutely free. All you have to do is pay $4.95 to cover the cost of shipping. And when you order your free book, you'll also get 3 trial issues of Newsmax magazine and 2 trial issues of Health Radar. We'll give you the number in the next segment. Join us right after this. First, it was the Hatfields versus the McCoys, but now it's the Trumps versus the Bushes.
Bush and Dukakis on crime. Bush supports the death penalty for first-degree murderers. Dukakis not only opposes the death penalty, he allowed first-degree murderers to have weekend pass.
Okay? So, yesterday, the Trump campaign released an anti-Jeb Bush video on Instagram that harkened back to the days of the first President Bush's hard-hitting and highly successful 1988 campaign advertisement against Democratic opponent Michael Dukakis. That advertisement would go on to be immortalized in campaign lore as the Willie Horton ad. Now, for those of you too young to remember Willie Horton, or for that matter, Michael Dukakis, take a look at the ad.
Bush and Dukakis on crime. Bush supports the death penalty for first-degree murderers. Dukakis not only opposes the death penalty, he allowed first-degree murderers to have weekend passes from prison. One was Willie Horton, who murdered a boy in a robbery, stabbing him 19 times. Despite a life sentence, Horton received 10 weekend passes from prison. Horton fled, kidnapped a young couple, stabbing the man and repeatedly raping his girlfriend. Weekend prison passes. Dukakis on crime.
That was an incredibly effective ad, and let me tell you, many people will suggest that that played a major role in the first President Bush winning that election. So, will Trump's latest effort to define Jeb Bush do as much damage as the Willie Horton ad did to Bush 41's first presidential opponent? You be the judge.
Yes, they broke the law, but it's not a felony. It's kind of it's an act of love.
Now today, Governor Bush fired back with a video of his own highlighting some of Donald Trump's less than conservative views espoused over the years by the GOP frontrunner.
I lived in New York City and Manhattan all my life, okay? So, you know, my views are a little bit different than if I lived in Iowa.
Partial birth abortion.
I'm very pro-choice. I am pro-choice in every respect and as far as it goes.
As far as single payer, it works in Canada. It works incredibly well in Scotland.
But the fact is that 25% for high-income people, it should be raised substantially.
Who would you like representing the United States in a deal with Iran, with this regime there?
Well, I think Hillary would do a good job. Hillary Clinton, I think, is a terrific woman. I mean, I'm a little biased because I've known her for years.
You know, it's interesting. For starters, I got to say, it used to be you had to pay a lot of money for those kinds of advertisements, right? Not anymore. The Trump ad ran on Instagram. Cost nothing except to make it, and the Bush ad he put up on YouTube, I believe, right? So it's fascinating that in today's day and age you can save a lot of money while making your point. But Noah, what you're seeing here are two competing strategies. The Bush folks want to paint Trump as an actual liberal, and Trump wants to paint Bush as this immigrant-loving, amnesty-supporting, whatever. Which succeeds?
Trump absolutely succeeds, particularly in this primary.
Right?
Yes, because Trump's voters know that they're supporting somebody who's not a conservative. They don't care. It has nothing to do with his conservative principles. This is everything and anything to do with being a protest vote against Bush, which is why Trump's ad against Bush is particularly effective. Not because that there's a plague of violent criminality that's being perpetrated by illegal immigrants, but because we have some very high-profile incidents which are generating a lot of interest on the right, and that is going to really focus the minds on whether or not this is a person who's soft on illegal immigration.
No one's got this right. None of us can disagree tonight because these are pretty much basic things. They don't care that Trump's not really a conservative. Those people voting for him, they're not even thinking about it.
Well, I think he's a conservative in some sense, in the best sense of the word for his supporters. He wants government smaller, and that starts with having fewer politicians. I'm not a big fan of what he stands for, but he has tapped in brilliantly to the fact that people are fed up 23% support for Trump, 23% for Ben Carson. Iowan Republicans are ready to say, give me anyone who has never held office, and that's who I'm going to support.
What's interesting is, while they couldn't care less what Trump is really for or not
Or
for,
against.
they do watch very carefully what Jeb is being for. Now, Jeb is now being portrayed as being soft on crime, but his record would certainly say otherwise. As governor of Florida, he was a very pro-gun, strongly anti-crime. So the question is, will Trump's efforts succeed in making it impossible for Jeb to once again paint himself, Brad, as tough on crime?
Well, he has been very tough on crime. I want to be clear, I'm not sure being pro-gun means you're tough on crime. That's a different conversation. That said, he has a good crime record, but he also is at the end of the day a politician, and I think the average voter goes, yeah, maybe, kind of, sort of, but at the end of the day, do I trust a politician or do I trust an entrepreneur?
So,
whether it's good or not, we know what they're saying.
So Trump is spending all this time focusing on Jeb Bush. Why isn't he focusing on Ben Carson, who is the one who's actually tied him in the Iowa polls? He isn't saying a word about Ben Carson.
Not yet. He might eventually. I think that there's something a little bit more personal and really focused about this attack on Jeb Bush. But
it's really been Jeb Bush all the way along.
I think voters grade him on a different level than they grade Carson and Trump because they're professional politicians. Respectfully, I don't think that there's anything to do with small government in that, but they really are grading these individuals on distinctly different qualities, and Jeb Bush is graded on a higher level because he's a professional politician.
Yeah. So you guys, we want to know your choice for the 2016 presidential nominee. We want to know who you want. Go to newsmaxpolls.com and cast your vote. Now, coming up next, we have the latest on that Kentucky clerk refusing to issue marriage licenses, not only to gay couples, people don't realize, but to all couples. So she's not charged with discrimination. Stay with us. It's going to be interesting. And welcome back to the Daily Wrap. How about we check in with Steve Malzberg and see what he has planned for tonight? Steve.
All right, Rick, coming up right after this show, we're going to hear from Larry Kudlow, who's going to weigh in on the war between Donald Trump and Jeb Bush. They have dueling videos that are out trashing one another. That should be interesting. Also, the Malzberg panel will weigh in on that. And the law clerk in Kentucky who refuses to grant licenses, marriage licenses to gay couples, the Supreme Court said she's got to do it. She's not doing it. She's due in court Thursday. We'll talk about that. We got Michael Barone, Lloyd Grove, and much more right after the Daily Wrap at 7 p.m. Eastern.
And thanks, Steve, if that was really you. You might have heard about the county clerk in Kentucky who refuses to give marriage licenses not only to gay couples but all couples, despite having been ordered by a federal court to do so. The clerk, Kim Davis, appealed the initial decision all the way to the United States Supreme Court. Yesterday, the highest court of the land denied Ms. Davis's request for a stay of the judge's ruling, and that means she is legally obligated to begin issuing marriage licenses to same-sex couples. However, Ms. Davis remains undeterred, today refusing two gay couples' requests for licenses to marry. As a result, on Thursday, she will now be required to appear before a federal judge where she could be held in contempt and ordered to pay a fine or be sentenced to some jail time. Because Ms. Davis is an elected official, she can't simply be fired, although she could be recalled if the majority of voters in her county wish to do so. Despite the problems she may face, Davis says she will continue to refuse marriage licenses to gay couples due to her religious beliefs. She has now released the following statement on her attorney's website. Some people have said I should resign, but I have done my job well. I never imagined a day like this would come where I would be asked to violate a central teaching of Scripture of Jesus himself regarding marriage. To issue a marriage license which conflicts with God's definition of marriage with my name affixed to the certificate would violate my conscience. It's not a light issue for me. It's a heaven or hell decision. For me, it's a decision of obedience. Now, Brad, there are really two issues here. There's religious freedom, and then there's the existing law. Is it fair for anybody to require Ms. Davis to adhere to the law if it violates her religious beliefs?
I think it is, and I say it with very cautiously. I have real sympathy for her.
Yeah.
And when a person of faith says it's not a light issue for me, I get that it's a heaven or hell decision for me, she writes. It's a decision of obedience. I get that, and that is real. but she also has an obligation to do the job she has been elected to do. And that's the issue. You've got to do your job. Then fight it out. Maybe we should have a better workaround. I think we probably should.
This is the problem. She has an option. Look, she swore to do the job, and more importantly, she swore to uphold the law. Now, she didn't say, I swear to uphold the law so long as it doesn't conflict with my religious or any other kind of belief.
Correct.
So now that it does, her option, her appropriate option, and I have sympathy for it too. I respect her point of view. I may or may not agree with it, but I respect it. She has to resign or do her job. Do you agree?
Absolutely.
No?
Yeah, there's no debate here, and I don't believe that her motives are especially worthy of merit or consideration. I think what she wants is to be martyred. I think she wants to be hauled off and taken into jail. I believe she wants to be held into contempt.
But now here's where it gets weird. I mentioned that she can be recalled. I took a look at how the law works in Kentucky. She can be recalled, but there's a problem. Most of the people in the county who voted for her support her.
Well, that's what this is ridiculous. If she were to resign her position in protest, say I can't do this, I can't in good faith sign these marriage certificates and martyr herself in that fashion, and she would become a celebrity on the right, among the religious and
she'd be making a whole lot of money giving speeches than she will be paid as the county clerk.
Exactly, she'd be everywhere. Her current strategy is just politically inept.
No, but to her credit, that's the purity of the motive, which is why I take it really seriously, but why she really has to resign, because she has lost the thread that knows to make a distinction between my freedom, your freedom, anyone's freedom to practice their faith as they see fit, and the fact that others have the same right. You can't impose your faith on someone else, and that's what she's doing. I don't agree with her decision, but I respect it, and I respect that it is politically inept because it comes from purity of faith. But you can't impose it.
I might agree with no.
Don't be so cynical. It doesn't help the argument either.
But wait a second. So now what has to happen? She's not going to get recalled because people there agree with her. She's not going to resign, it appears. So now it's got to go back to the court for a contempt proceeding because she is in contempt.
She's going to jail. There are pastors all over the country saying they want her to.
They're not going to want to put her in jail. That judge is thinking politics. He has to run for office in that county too. So my quick question, we need a quick answer, is when they fine her, should it not be her weekly salary since she's not doing her job?
Yes, a very substantial amount.
Should be a
that's a reasonable way to go. If the IRS can garnish wages, go for it. There must be a legal precedent for it.
Yeah, I think that's the way it should go. Well, there's definitely legal precedent. It's up to the judge. We want to know what you think about this. Does Kim Davis have the right to refuse to issue marriage licenses to gay couples? Should she be fined or jailed? Let us know. NewsmaxTV.com/comments. Coming up, we have news from the Vatican on abortions. Stay tuned. Pope Francis has laid out 3 important undertakings for the upcoming Jubilee year, which begins December 8th. Among those items is a new initiative that will allow all priests to absolve women of the sin of abortion. Here to tell us more about the Pope's plans for the Jubilee is Newsmax TV's John Bachman. John?
The Pope's visit to the United States will dominate the media coverage in just a few weeks, especially if he continues to make big announcements like the one we got today. Francis now says all priests during the upcoming Year of Mercy will be allowed to absolve women of the sin of abortion. Francis acknowledged that some women feel they have no choice. He said God's forgiveness cannot be denied to those who repent. Also this week, Pope Francis spoke by satellite to audiences in Chicago, Los Angeles, and McAllen, Texas on the U.S. border. During the virtual audience arranged by ABC News, he also encouraged a teen to sing for him after she told the pontiff she was a victim of bullying due to a skin condition.
May I ask of you to sing a song for me? Be courageous.
The Pope's progressive push on things like climate change and immigration could also represent a challenge for Republican presidential candidates as a GOP primary drags on. The Holy Year of Mercy officially begins on December 8th of this year and runs through November 20th of 2016. Rick, back to you in New York.
And thank you, John, for that report. Guys, how do you think this is going to play in this country with the Pope saying that priests can absolve the sin of abortion? I mean, that's going to get some heat here, isn't it?
Well, if people properly understand it, what he's saying is that all priests, as opposed to a limited number, can grant absolution for this sin. Whether I agree with him or not, he still believes, and the church believes, that abortion is a sin. What he's doing is actually trying to widen the range of mercy that this Jubilee year offers. Because he also reached to his right with the order of Pope Pius X, an ultra-conservative group, and wants them to be brought more into connection with the church. So what he's doing is actually consistent with what he's done all along. He's opening the range of mercy without undermining current church teaching. He still thinks it's a sin, and that means the women to be absolved of this sin have to experience contrition, confession, and a commitment to not doing it again. So I'm not sure he's gone all pro-choice on us, let's be clear.
But you know, it's interesting. Now, I'm not Catholic, but I do watch this Pope with a great deal of interest because I find him such a compelling guy. I just think he's an amazing man. But he puts himself in some very awkward positions. And I wonder what's going to happen with his upcoming visit to the United States, because more and more I hear Catholics on television complaining about these positions the Pope is taking. What's going to happen?
I don't know if this in particular, and again, I'm not a theologian, but I don't know if this is a radical departure from Catholic doctrine.
Actually, we should just let Brad make a speech here, because neither of us are.
He's just expanded the number of priests who can grant absolution. If what people want is a bomb-throwing pontiff, that's not him.
Maybe you know the answer.
But that's why this is really kind of annoying, is that this isn't really such a radical Catholic departure from Catholic doctrine. That's just the press is discovering Catholicism as it's been understood by Catholics for generations, but they're imposing onto this new liberal pope that they all happen to really appreciate ideologically. So they're sort of making it this papal doctrinal shift where it really isn't.
But here's what confuses me. What do you mean he's expanding? I mean, if my understanding, and again, no expert here, but a priest has the right to take confession and absolve you of your sins under the circumstances that you get absolved for sins.
Right.
What does it mean to widen the number? I thought all priests could do that.
Not all priests can absolve all sins. It turns out for certain sins, like abortion, only certain priests have the authority to grant that absolution.
So how do you go looking for one?
Well, it gets technical, and you're not a Catholic, so don't worry about it. You're not a woman, so it's not going to affect you. What's important is exactly what Noah said. Now, there are times I think he has politicized, and I happen not to think intelligently so, on issues of climate change, on issues of a kind of anti-capitalism he's taken up. But this is not that.
Why is that incorrect for him to do that?
It's not incorrect to take a position.
The man leads one of the largest
I
group
agree.
of people
And
on
I
the
believe
planet.
when you're religious 24/7, so it's not only about how you pray, it's how you live. That's fine. Because on those issues, it's been quite polarizing. Rather than focus on the human impact of it and widening the tent, he actually narrowed the tent. He suggested that people who are capitalist are somehow undermining God's view for the world, and that's a problem. But he's doing just the opposite here.
Wait. He's the Pope.
Right.
And the Pope is supposed to speak on behalf of God on earth, correct?
Yes, but what makes him interesting is he's always spoken out for God in a more nuanced way.
Okay, but
when it comes to climate change and the economy, he narrowed God's vision, not widened it.
You don't know what God's vision is.
No, I don't.
He's supposed to. So if he's saying that, why do we presume that he's narrowing something because it may not meet with your definition of what is
it's narrow
right?
because most topics, when he talks, more people can listen and feel included. On those issues, he narrowed the range of people who can listen and feel included.
Well, how else can you get the message across to people who disagree?
Because his typical message is there's more room in this tent than you imagine. And for whatever reason, on those issues, said no, the tent's going to be smaller. That's why I think what he did with abortion is consistent. What he's done on some of the other issues, less consistent, but he's a fascinating character.
I like that he took those stands. I really do.
Yeah.
And it's not, I'm not necessarily the world's biggest global warming freak, but I like that he did that. We want to know what you think about the Pope's plans to absolve abortion. Go to newsmaxtv.com/comments and let us know. And speaking of comments, we're going to read some of yours next. Stay with us. And welcome back to the Daily Wrap. We've been doing a little data mining, trying to dig up some of the best of your viewer comments, and we're ready to go. First up, we have a comment about the Iran deal from Ray, who says, the problem with the deal is it doesn't seem anyone has any information. Plus, there are no people left in Washington who listen to the majority of people. Only money talks, and unless you're writing the check directly to the so-called representative, your word means nothing. He's got a point there, guys.
He does. Look, the
He
truth
does.
is the majority of Americans oppose this deal.
Well, I got to interrupt you on that because yesterday I said the very same thing. There was a poll out that showed 55%. And yet today there's a university poll out that says the opposite.
Yeah, I
don't know what to
tend not to believe it because consistently the numbers have shown about 55% opposed, about 30% in favor, and about 15% who say, I don't really know. So I want to see more points that say to the opposite because we've been on this other trajectory pretty much straight through, and it is a little bit weird,
But
especially if
isn't
the president's advocating to have a filibuster.
Isn't this, though, the very kind of thing, Noah, just quickly, where because this is so hard for people to understand, including me, and I do this for a living, I read these things, don't we have to look to our representatives to maybe listen less to us and more to the experts that are telling them what's going on?
Well, they were promised, for example, by this administration, all the information related to this deal. We find out that the IAEA had been conducting side agreements with Iran. They weren't provided all the information. So we have a Congress that is essentially being misled or not properly informed and is really going on gut instinct. I think the American public are, and to be fair, there's a lot of money behind the opposition to this deal. But if the Congress were a little bit more in tune to what the general public has been saying about this, and I think that you're right, that there's been a general trend, we know what that trend is, that they would be in a much better position than I think they're going to be in a couple of years. This thing's going to sail through, and we'll regret it.
I take both of your points. My only point would be sometimes the public, not being experts in physics and nuclear physics, don't know. Let me go on to another one. Do we have another one there to see? Yeah, we have some comments on some of the interesting immigration plans we discussed on the show yesterday. Here's one from Carrie, who says, I don't think we need to tag people who come to the U.S. like FedEx. Why can't we have a passport checkpoint in every town like at the post office and have the passport be mandatory to check in at every stopping place or once a month? Shirley adds to that, shades of George Orwell, tagging people. When do these absurd ideas stop? When does the U.S. military take over and track everything we do? Think it won't happen? It already started. What kind of crazy people do we have running for office? I have not seen one person that I would vote for. Guys, they're not happy with Chris Christie's idea, are they?
I think they're not happy with Chris Christie in general. If we're going to talk about George Orwell, I would say internal passports along the lines of the Soviet Union are just a little bit more Orwellian than what Chris Christie is talking about, which, by the way, we don't know. We're putting a lot of words in his mouth. He didn't elaborate on this. He didn't say subcutaneous GPS chips. We're putting those words in his mouth. So I don't think it's really fair for us to be judging him based on our own presumptions of what he's talking about.
Look, but he did take us down that road.
Yeah, I'm all for giving him the benefit of the doubt. I love the man who describes himself as smooth as sandpaper. I think that's a real charming thing, but he meant something a little creepy here. Whatever it was, we don't know. We should ask another question.
It was a Hail Mary pass, and it didn't
He's
quite
looking
work.
for a moment and hasn't
and
had one.
we'll add one more to that. Irene says, when they come over illegally, they should not receive aid and driver's licenses, and they should not vote. I'm not sure anybody said they should. Jeff says fingerprints of every person entering our country and every person in our country should also have a photo ID. Problem solved. Not so much when you're talking about somebody who's here illegally when their visa expires. Also, voter fraud, problem solved. That's a much longer discussion. And Tim says they do not need to round up illegals. They can just do what they do now with warrants. You just send them home when they are picked up for something. If you stop them from coming in and then start sending them back when they are picked up for any reason, it will only take 5 to 7 years to make a big difference. Actually, that last comment I find interesting because some of the more rational people who do have strong anti-illegal immigration opinions are now suggesting this, that instead of this, we're going to send home 11 million or maybe more people by rounding them up. When you do arrest somebody or pick somebody up and they don't meet the test, that's when you send them. And
if you
there's a
break
logic
the
to
law
that,
and this
there?
isn't your home, you're going back to what your legal home is. That doesn't sound so crazy.
It doesn't, but you are entitled to due process, and there's absolutely nothing we can do about stopping due process unless we want to have the debate about whether or not we get rid of court dates for illegal immigrants.
No, I agree with that, but the automatic response, if you are found guilty, is this isn't your home, you're going home.
Okay. What else? We've been asking you for your choice for the 2016 presidential nomination. Some of you are saying that you pick Ben Carson. One commenter here says Trump has a narcissistic personality and would be a danger to anyone or any leader who thwarts him. He could start a nuclear war if he doesn't get his way. All right, let's go to the end here, please. And we had a lot more comments. We're just not going to get to them. So I'll just tell you this. Remember, if you want to weigh in on any of these issues we talk about here on the show, be sure to go to newsmaxtv.com/comments and let us know what you think. Remember to get your copy of Ben Carson's book, One Nation. It's up on the screen. Follow that phone number and go to that internet address and you can pick up the book. We will be right back for Yay or Nay. This is the Daily Wrap. Back with more Daily Wrap, and it's time for Yay or Nay. First up, Washington State University is coming under fire as university professors have provided their students with a list of words and terms that are prohibited in their classrooms. Students in these classes will not be allowed to use the words illegal aliens, male, or female. And if they do, they'll get, wait for it, a failing grade. Is this yet another case of political correctness gone very, very wrong, Noah Rothman?
I don't think there's much debate about whether or not this is epidemic.
Going on
there better
here?
not be much debate, and what's worse is this is the kind of foolishness that makes real sensitivity look like a bad idea. So whoever is motivated to do this, it's ridiculous.
You know, when I was taking a look at this earlier, I was trying to think, okay, what I would spend half my time in this class trying to get around using words. You know, if I'm discussing something in a textbook that happens to be a male,
right.
How am I going to get around that?
Can a whole new subset of pronouns that you're supposed to use.
Yeah,
I mean, they're all ridiculous. I'm not especially worried about this because we're talking about an environment that really fosters dissent.
But can you imagine failing a class because you said the word
man? It's
I
ridiculous.
can't imagine that. I absolutely can't imagine that. But I can also imagine a substantial backlash from a silent majority of young students who reject this kind of
I hope there will be. It's exactly right. I hope that there will be.
You know, look, I'm supposed to be a progressive and all, but folks, that doesn't mean you're stupid. And that's stupid. You
exactly
know?
right.
All right, watch out, Donald Trump. You may have your 757, but Scott Walker, he's got a Harley, and he's not afraid to use it. Mixing business with pleasure, the Wisconsin governor, who has a long-standing relationship with Wisconsin-based Harley Davidson, will campaign through all 10 counties in New Hampshire this holiday weekend on the back of his Harley Hog. Before wrapping up the trip at a picnic in Salem, he's going to be hitting the trail. So Trump's got himself a jet. Walker has a Harley. The question is, shouldn't these candidates be trying to outdo one another on policy as opposed to who's got the coolest set of wheels or engines or...
Yeah, I mean, if there's one lesson we've learned from this primary season, it's that policy doesn't really matter a whole lot. So yeah, just go nuts on your Harley. It's easy to be cynical about this, but that's kind of badass. I don't think that's terrible.
So you actually like it?
Yeah. I mean,
look, how you get there is part of the message. So I get it, but it's pretty ironic that these two characters, neither of them were as good at details of anything, is focusing on how they get there to the exclusion of what do you say when you arrive?
And you know what? I would say that in Scott Walker's case, wrong move. A lot of candidates could get away with that, but Scott Walker has dug himself into such a large hole that showing up on a Harley will just leave people shaking their heads and going, well, at least you know how to drive.
You think it'll read like Michael Dukakis in The Tank?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, he needs to appear serious. He needs to appear like he actually knows something beyond how to drive a two-wheel machine.
It's not the first time he's been on this motorcycle. He's ridden around quite a bunch.
And finally tonight, rapper Kanye West announced his plans to run for president in 2020 at the MTV Video Music Awards this past Sunday night. While his announcement left many scratching their heads, including me, one recent college grad is cashing in on it. You see, 24-year-old Trammell Ferguson bought the domain name KanyeForPresident.com, and he just did it for fun back in April. He did it with a few other odd candidate choices like PeterGriffinForPresident.com. If you don't know, Peter Griffin is one of the characters in Family Guy. Now that Kanye has announced his plans, the domain is estimated to be worth $80,000. Way to go, Mr. Ferguson. Ferguson is waiting to sell the domain until he hears from the presidential hopeful himself. Should this kid stop waiting for Kanye and just sell the domain name while the offers are coming in? Yay or nay?
I'd hold out for a while. He was smart enough to buy the domain. Wait, he'll hear from Kanye.
He's got 4 years. Why run now?
I agree.
Sit on
Besides,
that one.
And but I actually don't agree because Kanye's never really going to run. I would sell it right now while there's some real people who were willing to offer up some money.
The same thing about
You never
Trump.
know. He may pay for it just to own it. He's Kanye West.
He may, but he's going to forget that he even said it. He was stoned when he made the comment, so it's going to vanish. All right, everybody, that is all for tonight. I'm Rick Unger on behalf of our panel. I thank you for joining us tonight. It was fun. We did it with 3 tonight instead of 4. Did you guys like it?
We can stand on 3 legs or 6.
Be sure to stay tuned because the Steve Malzberg show is up next, and I'm pretty sure his mouth will be moving.